What is a low budget movie?
Low budget movie, it's so hard to define what a low budget movie is because sometimes you see something that was made and it's like $10 million. And that is way low budget for Hollywood. But is that low budget like you and I could afford to make a $10 million film, a feature film? I don't think so, but it is considered low budget. So Coda, that won the Academy Award this year, is a low budget film that was made for $10 million. But that was obviously a financed film. It wasn't out of her own pocket that she made that film. There are people who can make films out of their own pocket. Many years ago, but it's still a prime example, is Robert Rodriguez's El Mariachi that he made for $7,000, that he earned the money by selling his body to science. Very famous story. You know, he's written an entire book about it, but he made an entire feature film, shot on film, for $7,000. I know a lot of people have made feature films for like $11,000, $15,000, but that's not shooting for a long time. That's shooting for a very limited time in very limited locations. And it's not going to compete with a Hollywood film whatsoever. It's going to feel very much, like there isn't a lot of money there. And hopefully there's some kind of story that just has to be told, and the filmmaker couldn't wait around to try to get real funding for it. So they just made it themselves. You know, they like, by hook or by crook, this is getting made with whatever money I can raise, hopefully maybe by, Kickstarter or something like that. But whatever money I can make for this, we're going to make this film. And that's what I consider it's not low budget at that point, it's no budget. That's always the term you use. It's like no budget film. But there are levels. There's, and SAG has different agreements for how much money, there's a sort of ultra low budget, no micro budget, et cetera. There are official terms for like what money categories are. But I think most filmmakers, if they're doing it themselves, are kind of doing it on the no budget school.
How is a $1 million movie a low budget film?
Well, I know $1 million sounds like a lot of money, but it isn't. $1 million is, goes away in a second. And remember that $1 million is not just covering production, it's post-production as well. And if you're paying for locations and paying for people, and you have to pay for people when you're making a feature film, even if you're shooting it as quick as, 11 days or 18 days, paying for people, paying for locations, paying for food, eats up a lot of money. So, I don't have $1 million, so I'm not making $1 million film. I know a lot of filmmakers that took a long time to be able to raise that kind of money. But when they were able to raise that money, they made films that did get attention, usually on the festival circuit but it's tricky on the festival circuit now too. It's very hard to get the festival circuit to program a film that it has to be really exceptional, that has no stars in it, that was made for no money. We live in the world, unfortunately, now where there's too much content. So, you have to have a reason why people should watch your $1 million film. And hopefully the reason is you're a very unique storyteller. But I tell people this all the time. We're kind of waiting for the next Quentin Tarantino to arrive. There hasn't been anybody for a long time that just radically blew everybody away for a film that they made with no money and no stars, but they had such a unique voice. So, that's what we're looking for, that really unique person that comes through, that has something super interesting to say and is telling it in a very unique way and blows us all away with what they want to do. And quite often what it is people who are just doing Hollywood movies or Hollywood TV shows cheap. And that's what they want to, they funded it themselves and they can totally do it, but it's not special or unique or worth our while watching.
Well, I know you're an Elvis fan and you've written a book about Elvis. So if we took the same analogy for we're waiting for the next Elvis.
Right.
There's so many quote unquote Elvises now. I think it's harder to sift through.
Completely.
We're kind of spoiled.
It takes a lot of money to launch somebody, to make them, so Billie Eilish, who my niece adores, it's like she was self-produced and all this kind of stuff, but it took a lot of money to launch her. So the fact that she's doing arena tours and things of that sort, it's not a cheap thing to become internationally known. So there's just too much content now.
What are 3 keys to making a low budget film?
Well, it's what you can achieve with that money. I just like with short filmmaking, I don't think you should be so ambitious that you have to do like a really low rent version of what you can do. I think you should make something spectacular with the money that you have. So you want to look carefully at what you can do with that money. Also, it's a big commitment. And I'm coming from someone who loves shorts, I would recommend you do a killer short versus a weak feature, low budget feature, People are, it's hard enough to convince them to watch your fabulous 8-minute short. To convince them to watch your 90-minute feature is asking a lot. It has to be really special and unique. And when those show up, people are super excited about. But I ask you, you tell me how many, well, you've seen them on TV, but how many $1 million films have you paid money to go see in the theater?
Well, I don't know if they were 1 million. They might have been a little more, but I do appreciate, art house cinema. I know I'm not supposed to say that word. I'm sorry.
I say it sometimes too.
But you're right. I'm actually more geared toward a low budget film than I am some big Hollywood tentpole.
The amazing, because I teach low budget filmmaking, the amazing thing last year, the films that got nominated for the Academy Award, because it was the pandemic year, and because Hollywood didn't want to put their expensive films out in the theater, they were amazingly low budget, the films that were all nominated. I mean, Nomadland, things, those kind of films, they weren't $1 million films, but Minari, I think, was very close to $1 million. So there were it was a nice category last year that there were a lot of films that were made for very little money. Drive My Car this year, I think, was made, not an American film, but, made for very little money too. So there is amazing sometimes when these $1 million films can go as high as being Academy nominated, and you're like, oh, look what they did with $1 million. Truly impressive.
What are some strategies that anyone can use to break down a screenplay and analyze a budget?
Locations is a big part because, if you're going to be moving a lot of locations, that takes a lot of time. So quite often you'll see for low budget films, they're set in a few locations and they don't move that much. Plus you have to actually secure those locations. So that's why you see a lot of low budget films that are shot in somebody's home. Because you can shoot in your own home, you don't have to move around, you can shoot in different parts of your home and get a lot of production that way. You see a lot of them shot in cars, same thing, it's very easy to be driving and filming and it looks nice and there's motion and things like that. So you got to think about how many locations there are, how many actors there are, how long it's going to take you to actually shoot it. Those are the kind of 3 big things that kind of delve and how expensive it's going to be.
And how many films can you think of that were successful in one location? I mean, you can think of Tape. Oh, yeah. That was excellent, But
you'd be surprised how many things are kind of set in a house that you didn't even think about it, that it was set in the house. There's a great film called The Invitation, Karen Kurosama's film that was like, it's kind of a horror or a thriller kind of film, and they're all brought to be at the house. And that's kind of a traditional, everyone gets murdered in the house kind of film type of thing. And there's a lot of films you haven't seen that are truly just talking people in a house.
What tips do you have for maximizing on-screen value?
So, the money should really be spent so it looks great on screen. One of the things that I always tell my students when I teach low budget filmmaking is white walls are a big bugaboo, that they look cheap. White walls totally look cheap, and it makes everything look terrible. So as much as I can shoot for free in my kitchen, well, if all those cabinets are white and it'll look incredibly cheap. Where it's so easy to hang a backdrop or put some, make some artwork or whatever and have that in the backdrop. The camera loves detail. The camera loves a lot of things to look very full. So there are tricks, to make things look more expensive than they are. And also think about what you have access to that is more expensive than that somebody else would have to pay for. So, if you want, if the character has to have an expensive car, but you don't actually have an expensive car, who do you know who has an expensive car who would lend it to you for the day? You'd be surprised how many people you know who have things that contribute to the production value.
And when you say artwork, you say make artwork. Right. That is the key right there.
Because anything that's copyrighted, you have to be very careful about what you're doing. And some of the things are like, oh, well, let's shoot a scene in the bus. Well, if you don't have the rights to shoot in the bus, and later on, especially for a feature film, your dream as a feature film is going to get distributed in some way. So everything has to be cleared in the feature film. And you can't do as many risky things as you can with the short, because short, nobody cares. Nobody's going to make money. We can do whatever you want to do, more or less. But for a feature, the dream is to have this released into the public. So you are in control of everything in a narrative film. You need to make sure that everything is cleared and everything is done properly, and you have releases and all that kind of stuff. There's no excuse to be like, oh, well, we were friends, so I didn't have him sign anything. And then later on, the whole chain of title falls apart because you didn't have your script copyrighted, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. And then your film becomes problematic.
How would you budget a $50,000 movie? Can you give us a breakdown?
So don't think of it all as the production part, because post-production counts so much. So I would definitely think about what kind of access do you have for stuff in post-production, and then what kind of post-production are you going to need to spend money on? Because what people often do is they just blow it all on production. It used to be called getting it into the can when it was actual film reels that would be put into the can. Then you have to worry about developing it and all that kind of stuff. We still use that term in the can of like, okay, you finished shooting, but now what do you do? And they often just stole all the money had for post-production because you desperately needed it for production. You just start spending it because you needed to, and now all of a sudden it's like, and now there's post and there's no money in it. So I would definitely recommend, of that money, post-production is so important and adds so much, and you can get so many things for free in production that you can't get in post. So I would definitely, I would say, even if you want to cut that money in half and put half for production and half for post, knowing again you're probably going to steal some of that money from post when you get in trouble in production, because it's just sitting there and you always think I can earn more money later on. But so I would truthfully split it in half and be like, okay, half of that's going to be for production, post-production. And if you're going to send this off just with like with the short, if you're going to send it off on the festival circuit, you should have some marketing money set aside too. So make that combination post/marketing money, and spend only 25 on production. And then you have to think of like, okay, well, how many days are we going to shoot? Because if we just ballpark it, if you say like, even if I spent no money in pre-production and just in production, well, if I'm shooting, 25 days, well, now I only have $1,000 a day, and that starts dividing up into this and that and that. It's like, well, that's no money. So mostly low production films shoot less days, because then you can have more money per day. But for a $50,000 film, depending on what your situation is, I would think you're shooting maybe 12 days as opposed to 18 days.
And let's suppose you say, well, judging the film probably won't get into any major festivals. It's a short, so I just want to go to local ones with my friends. So how much would you say theoretically to put aside for festival budget?
Well, so actually, for short films, we often really recommend doing local festivals, because that's where you know people, and you can have your film seen by people who know you, and you can go to the festival because you're there. But you still want to try to submit it to other places. So there's application fees, and then there's travel fees when you do it. So I often kind of say to filmmakers, well, let's say you're going to try, just as a bad average, but like 30 festivals you might apply to, and average out $30 per application for a short film. Feature films are more expensive for festivals. And some are going to cost more, some are going to cost less, some might. But that gives you kind of like a ballpark of how much you might spend. And then you want to budget at least $1,000 or $2,000 to go somewhere at some point if you wanted to. But if you're local, then that's even better. And hopefully you won't spend that much money at all.
Is there any way to get a big name actor for a $50,000 budget?
So here's the thing about big name actors, for both a short and for a feature, everybody always wants to work. And, especially if you're a SAG shoot, so they can work if they're a SAG actor, they, in theory, you were so special, and your project is so special, and they can get on the ground floor of getting to do something that's unique. So I used to work for a casting director many years ago, and he'd say about certain actors, like, they're a great cop number 2. Well, cop number 2, you recognize that face because they've been a great cop number 2 forever, but they want to be, not necessarily cop number 1, but they want to be the romantic lead or whatever. And so here's an opportunity for them to be not cop number 1. Cup number 2, they get to be the romantic lead. And so they will want to do your short or your feature if you can have access to them. The problem is they are also, though, used to being on this TV show where they've had the trailer and the hours are such and the food is such. I always make the joke of like, they're not so good about changing clothes in the Burger King restroom. Whereas, your friend from film school is totally up for that. But these people are used to a certain level of professionalism that they might not be at the same level that you are. So that's something to think about. Is this something, everyone should be making the same film. And the person who is, used to TV money is not the same person who is happy to change in the Burger King restroom. So that's one thing to consider. Also, do you have access to these people, But, maybe you're in an acting class with somebody who is an actor of note, and you do have access to them, and they know you, and they like to do all these different things. Why wouldn't you want to have this actor who's really talented versus somebody who, you've never heard of and have no idea how good of an actor they are? And there's talk about hook or interest. A festival is more likely wanting to let's just say Nicole Kidman was your aunt. So festival is more likely to play a short film with your aunt Nicole Kidman in it. You're pretty much in, as long as the film doesn't suck. And if you can guarantee Nicole will come, you're in. So there's a big advantage of that. But then I always say then it becomes the Nicole Kidman short, and it's all about Nicole Kidman being there, and everyone wants to talk to Nicole Kidman. And if you made this because it should be the you show, all of a sudden it's not the you show. So that's something to think about too. You know, is your film any good, or is it all just because she's in it and that's all people want to know about? But Hollywood would love to see that Nicole Kidman short. Festivals would love to play it. You could put it online and people would be interested in seeing it. You're trading on that name.
Sure, and sometimes they don't want to see the you show until they know kind of who you've worked with.
Yeah, oh yeah.
So
more inclined to be like, she can work with Nicole Kidman. I think she can direct, our little cop show or something like that.
Right. Where are filmmakers most likely to overspend?
Shorts are a learning experience for everybody, so you don't know what to spend on and what not to spend on. So sometimes you don't have the right access, or somebody says the cameraman insists that they really need you to rent this. One of our short films, the cameraman was a commercial director and he wanted this jib arm. And we were like, we're not paying for a jib arm. And he's like, I'll call in favors. So we didn't pay for it, but he called in favors. But then we had to wait for the jib arm to arrive. And the jib arm had somebody that carried the jib and put it all together and operated it. So there was another person on the set. And all of a sudden this jib arm that we didn't want, but he wanted, cost us time, versus money. So that's things to think about of all of these decisions. Now, it made the film look fabulous. And when you see it, I think it was probably worth the time and money, and I didn't pay for it. So, in that sense, it was really worthwhile. We did a lot of short films with animals, and we paid for the professional animals. We didn't know at the time that it worked, that you had to pay from the moment they left their ranch to the time they go back to their ranch. So all of a sudden it was extremely expensive to have these professional animals. And then one of the little things that we did, my famous quote from that was, we had a short film that had a horse and a frog. And I'm like, why is the frog more expensive than the horse? And the answer was, it's harder to train a frog than a horse. Totally legitimate. I completely understand now. Yes, that is the right answer. And now I understand. And yeah, we probably might have had a friend who knew someone who had a horse that could bring in the horse or whatever, but we probably didn't have a friend that had a frog that could do what we needed to do on camera, on time for a 2-day short. So yes, it was worthwhile spending money on that frog. So, you could write a short film about starring a frog. You think, how hard could it be for me to go, I have frogs in my backyard, and then you realize, oh my God, it is really hard to make a film starring a frog. And so even with the professional dog, it took longer than we thought it was going to take.
That's really interesting. I did not know that. Hey, you could have used Kermit. You could have.
Exactly. That's the way to do it. Think something different. Okay, so now we can't afford a professional frog. So how cute would it be? Not Kermit, because that's copyrighted. But let's make our own. Somebody is probably a puppet person or a craft person who could put together a unique frog for you. And that might be a different kind of film, but I think that would be a more interesting for a film to have this puppet frog in it. And then also, because this is unique property, maybe you've now created a character that people are super interested in with this frog. And all of a sudden, you get meetings with people who are wanting to do puppet shows, and you have a puppet in yours. And so now all of a sudden you're getting hired to work for Sesame Street because you couldn't afford the professional animal frog. So it worked out well, and it made it different and unique, and yay.
What's the best way for filmmakers to keep their budgets down, save money?
So Robert Rodriguez was one of the famous low-budget filmmakers that he made the film for $7,000 because he sold his body to science to make that kind of money. And he has a terrific making of piece called the 10-Minute Film School that I actually show when I teach because it's so inspiring. It's on YouTube. You can easily watch it. But he says the secret to not pay money is to not let money go out of hand is just to refuse to spend money. And he has an example from El Mariachi that they had 2 different guitar cases, one of which didn't have the fabric on the top. And the quote he always says is, I was too cheap to spend $1 for a spray can to paint the back of it. So they had to do all this complicated shooting to get around it, but he saved that money for the spray paint. So I'm the style producer, like, it's only $1, go buy the damn paint, let's spray it and move on. But his, every penny counted for him. He sold his body for science for every $1 for that. So just his tip was just refuse to spend money. You find a creative way to shoot around your problems and don't spend money. And if you're like me, like, I'll spend $1 out of my pocket. All of a sudden it's like, we don't have money for lunch. Okay, here, let me spend more money for lunch. And all of a sudden your credit card bill, you leave the film with, why is my credit card bill $12,000? It's because you kept on spending stuff that you had to buy.
So then you should keep an itemized list so that you really see it in black and white, what you're spending?
Well, you should make a budget, and then, you can be harsh and say, I'm not going to spend more than this. I'm a big fan of contingency, though. Put some money for contingency, because things happen. And, you can say, we're not going to spend money, but then something happens and where's the money for that? So we can't control filmmaking. That's what's kind of a miracle about it. Animators can. Animators just sit there and draw, and they control absolutely everything about it. And the time is what takes time. Or I'm saying old-fashioned drawing. I mean, they're doing it on the computer, right? It's all just computer stuff, but there's still sound for animation. You still got to deal with sound. You still have to deal with music, et cetera, et cetera. Everything always costs money, and you can spend a lot of time getting people to let you do it for free. And a lot of part of being a filmmaker is to communicate and to talk to people and to convince them that you're doing this fabulous project and shouldn't they help you and shouldn't they be along and it's going to be a great experience and nobody's getting paid and oh my God, the whole film will come together if you could just give me this free can of paint. Or do you know anybody who has a free can of paint that they could lend us? You just have to ask and put the time into it. But that's where it takes a lot of time, So you can list out, this is what we're going to need, this is how much we're going to pay per head, et cetera, but then something always goes wrong.
Sure. And we can also get caught up in the spirit of it, I think, feeling good and feeling like, wow, this is going to be amazing. Let me just go over this. Instead of going to this fast food chain, let me try this place on Ventura Boulevard that has this great pizza and I want to really treat everybody. That's not a bad way to spend the money.
But also in the producer-wise, it's like, oh my God, it's going to take you 20 minutes to go get that and pull it back and do that. And it's like, oh, this is a bad decision. A better decision would be just spend a little bit more money to bring it here and do this and do that. And and you're only making this thing one. The other thing I always tell people too is when the film plays, they don't put a big sign in front of it that says, this film was only made for $50,000. Nobody knows how much that film was made for. The thing that counts is what's on the screen. So also another one of my favorite quotes that I have in my book that a filmmaker said, it was like, nobody ever walks away going, the acting was terrible in that film, but the props were excellent. We spend so much time worrying about the props. It's like the acting is really everything. We should have really good acting. It's so easy to want it to be the house that looks perfect and spend time getting the lighting exactly right and put that prop right here, whatever. But people are watching, they forgive a lot. They want a story well told via storytelling and via acting and the supporting elements like sound, etc. But they have no idea how much you spent on it. And all they know is the final product. And the final product should be something that you feel, you've had to make a lot of artistic compromises, but it should be something that you feel proud of and you're happy to send out into the world. And people are thrilled to see and enjoy. And film is forever. So this is something you're sending out for the world forever. And that's how it exists.
And so just as with, let's say, a feature film, there's the sort of taboo about talking about the budget. Is there the same taboo with short films?
It's so flexible, though, because let's say I bartered all this stuff, but that if I had to pay for it, it would be a different budget. So something I can make with my students, with my experiences and people I can call on for favors is not something that you could make. If we had the exact same script, I could make it for a whole different budget than you could make it for a whole different budget. And they'd be different films, obviously, because it would be my version versus your version. But it's not fair to compare because if you're trying to do it for not paying rate, if we're paying rate for everything, then it should be exactly the same and fair and equal. But still, my talent is different than your talent. And I would pick different actors than you would pick. And if money was nothing, look how many films are made for tons of money and they totally suck because people didn't care about the story or they weren't filmmakers and they weren't storytellers. That's what counts. So, the budget, schmudget, it's like, again, you're making something that's permanent and it's out there and it's being shared and you're not going to get to remake it or whatever. This is something that exists and you should be happy with what you did. And you can also forgive yourself for a lot saying it's a learning experience. And, I learned a lot from having made that. And a lot of people, when they look back at their early work, cringe. They're like, their short films sucked, their feature films sucked. But I actually went to an event for Christopher Nolan for his first feature film, Following, which got re-released. And he was like, look, I'm still talking about Following all these years later. He's done all these huge films.
I love that film.
Following was so fabulous. And again, people love that film, but he's like, this is still following me around. He still has he's still talking about it and doing things. Yeah. Uh-huh. So,
But last but not least, suppose you're lucky enough to get into a festival, you're up there with the Q&A, and then you get the guy,
all right, hi, the question.
Okay, what was your budget? And you're like, okay, do I tell him the truth?
So for feature films, the reason why you don't tell them the truth is because there's a implied value for it later on, and you want, if there's a bidding war for it and they know you only paid $1 million for it, they're not going to say, and we're giving you 25 million, you know, it's like they're way overspending at that point for what the value of the thing actually is. So you just don't tell them, you know, it's like, how much do you want to pay for it? Why does it matter how much I paid for it? For a short film, I think it's just so many favors and all that, that what's the point of telling people how much it costs? I think people often ask because they want to kind of figure out, can they do it? You know, like if you made that for $1,000, then maybe I could make it for $1,000. And if there isn't really a market for it, what does it hurt for you to say $1,000? But I think more interesting is to say how many days you shot or something like that. Because you can say, okay, I see what a 18-day shoot looks like, or I see what a 2-day shoot looks like, and I see what a 5-day shoot looks like. And I guarantee you, if I showed you what a film that was shot for 5 days and 2 days, you would totally see what you get difference, not just budget, but you know, everything, what the difference is. So to me, it's more like days. But so if somebody asks a question, you just say, oh my God, we got so many things for free. And now you spin it into your own way, like the politicians that don't want to answer. And I want to thank everybody here. This theater's filled with people who gave me things for free. And I want to take this opportunity to thank you for your contributions. This film is not just all about me. This film is about all of us. And that's sincere too. It's not just, you know, politicians kissing ass.